There are 5 phrases that stupid men repeat every single day. I just need more motivation. I'm working on it. Things will get better. I didn't have a choice. That's just who I am. If any of those landed, keep watching, because what I am about to tell you has nothing to do with motivation. It has everything to do with why you are still in the same position you were in 2 years ago. Most men believe the war is outside them. The competitor, the system, the economy, the people who got lucky while you grinded. You have spent years staring at external enemies, mapping their moves, resenting their wins. And while you were watching them, the real enemy was sitting inside your skull, eating your focus, your time and your future. Niccolo Machiavelli did not write for dreamers. He wrote for men who needed to win, men who operated in hostile environments, surrounded by people who smiled in the morning and stabbed by afternoon. He understood something brutal and permanent. The man who cannot govern himself cannot govern anything. Not a room, not a negotiation, not a life. This is not a video about discipline as a habit. It is not a morning routine. It is not a productivity framework. This is a psychological autopsy of the man you are right now versus the man you are capable of becoming. And some of what you hear will be uncomfortable, because the diagnosis of a real problem almost always is. 1. The war you don't know you're already losing. Before you conquer anything external, you must conquer what is happening between your ears. Machiavelli was precise about this. He studied men who had every resource, every alliance, every structural advantage, and still lost. Not because the enemy was stronger, because they could not command themselves. They were ruled by their moods, their fears, their need for reassurance. They handed their enemies the keys from the inside. You are doing the same thing. Every time you sit down to work and find yourself 30 minutes deep into nothing, that is not laziness. That is a military failure. Your mind went rogue. It chose the path of least resistance because you never installed a chain of command. You never decided who was in charge. And in the absence of that decision, the weakest part of you took over. The general does not negotiate with weakness. He does not bargain with excuses. He does not ask the part of him that wants to quit for its opinion. He identifies the objective, assesses the terrain, and moves. The negotiating happens before the battle, in the planning room. Once the mission starts, the only language spoken is execution. Machiavelli wrote in The Prince that a ruler who is not prepared for war in times of peace will not survive war when it arrives. Apply that to your mind. The mental infrastructure you build today is the only thing standing between you and collapse when real pressure arrives. And real pressure is always coming. Your mind is the battlefield. Right now, most men are losing on it without realizing the war has already begun. Ask yourself one question and answer it honestly. Who is actually in command of your mind today? If the answer is not you, that is where everything starts. 2. Stop reacting. Start winning. You have been trained to react, not by an enemy, by the world itself. Every notification is a trigger. Every insult is a provocation. Every setback is designed to spike your cortisol and force you into movement before you have thought. The man who reacts first is the man who has surrendered control of the situation. His emotions are being used as a steering wheel by everyone around him. Machiavelli watched this destroy powerful men. He observed courts full of intelligent, capable individuals who would erupt the moment their ego was threatened, who would make catastrophic decisions in the heat of anger, who would reveal their hand during a moment of frustration and spend years paying for that one unguarded second. He concluded that the ability to pause between stimulus and response was not a personality trait. It was a political skill, the most important one a man could develop. Here is what your emotional reaction actually communicates to sharp minds watching you. It tells them exactly where you can be hurt. It maps your insecurities. It shows them which buttons exist and confirms that pressing them works. Stop giving people that map, the wall between what happens to you and how you respond. That wall is power. Inside that wall you think, you assess. You choose the response that serves your mission rather than the response that satisfies your wound. Feelings are data. They are information about what is happening. They are not commands. The general reads them, notes them, and then sets them aside to do what must be done. React, and you become predictable. Calculate, and you become untouchable. Drop in the comments right now, I calculate. Because the man who can say that and mean it is already operating differently than 90% of the men around him. 3. The cut that changes everything. Machiavelli was not sentimental. He was precise about what this costs. In The Prince, he made clear that a leader who tries to be loved by everyone will eventually be destroyed by everyone. You cannot build something real while carrying the weight of everything that drains you. The decision about what to remove from your life is more powerful than any decision about what to add. Most men are afraid of that cut. They hold friendships that cost them energy because they fear being alone. They maintain habits that sabotage them because change registers in the body as grief. They stay in environments that shrink them because familiarity has been mistaken for safety. And every single day that weight compounds. Every day you carry what should be cut. You arrive at your mission depleted before you begin. Here is the reality. Your environment is not just influencing you, it is programming you. Every conversation you engage in, every space you occupy, every relationship you maintain is either sharpening you or dulling you. There is no neutral ground. The general conducts an audit. He looks at everything around him with the same cold objectivity he applies to enemy intelligence. Does this relationship elevate my mission or dilute it? Does this habit build my capacity or erode it? Does this environment produce the man I am building or keep pulling me back toward the one I am trying to leave behind? These are not cruel questions. They are necessary ones. The man who refuses to cut will always be outmaneuvered by the man who does. Not because he lacks talent, because he is spending talent on things that return nothing. Guard your focus like it is the most valuable asset you own, because it is. 4. Shut up and watch them fall apart. Power does not announce itself. Power does not explain itself. Power does not justify itself to those who are not qualified to understand it. And yet most men spend the majority of their energy doing exactly that, explaining their moves, defending their decisions, broadcasting their plans before a single result exists. This is not confidence. It is the language of a man who needs the world's permission to proceed. Machiavelli watched kingdoms fall not because the princes lacked intelligence. They fell because those princes could not control what came out of their mouths. He observed courts and power structures collapse because men revealed too much, too soon, to too many. Information is currency. The man who spends his currency carelessly will always end up bankrupt, regardless of how much he started with. Every word you speak unnecessarily is a withdrawal from your power account. Every plan you announce before execution is a strategy handed to your opposition. Every emotion you displayed publicly is a map of your vulnerabilities, given freely. Here is what people actually do with your openness. They do not respond with trust. They respond with calculation. The moment you reveal your fears, your desires, your insecurities, your next move, you have handed the sharpest person in the room a set of levers they will use against you. The general speaks with intention, or he does not speak at all. Silence in a conversation is not emptiness. It is pressure. It forces the other person to fill the void, to reveal themselves, to expose their hand while you keep yours close. Silence is intelligence gathering. It is dominance without aggression. It is the kind of control that cannot be argued with, cannot be manipulated, cannot be disarmed. The lion does not roar before the hunt. He moves without announcement, strikes without warning, and lets the outcome speak. Stop explaining your vision to people who are not on the battlefield with you. Speak less. Observe more. Let your results be the only statement that matters. 5. Your worst enemy lives inside you. There is a specific kind of destruction that does not come from enemies. It comes from within, from appetite without direction, from desire without architecture, from the raw, unregulated hunger that lives in every man, and when left unchecked, becomes the very force that dismantles everything he has built. Machiavelli observed this with surgical precision. He saw that men are conquered most completely, not by outside forces, but by their own passions. History confirms this with a consistency that should stop every serious man cold. Look at the men who had everything and lost it. The ones who built real things and then watched them collapse in plain sight. In almost every case, the weapon that brought them down was not in an enemy's hand. It was in their own. Unchecked desire for pleasure, unmanaged addiction to validation, uncontrolled appetite that had no ceiling and no direction. Hunger without discipline is not ambition. It is a slow, sophisticated form of self-destruction, wearing the mask of drive. The men who became genuinely dangerous were not men without desire. They were men who had learned to place desire in chains, to direct it, throttle it, release it only in the precise direction of the mission. They did not eliminate hunger. They weaponized it. They turned raw appetite into focused, sustained energy that compounded over time into results that looked supernatural from the outside. Marcus Aurelius governed the most powerful empire in the ancient world and did not lose himself to its pleasures. That was not accidental. It was the result of daily, deliberate, internal governance. He wrote, not for an audience, but as an act of self-command, reminding himself day after day that the quality of his life was determined not by what happened to him, but by what he chose to want. Control your hunger, and you control your timeline. Control your timeline, and you control your outcomes. Control your outcomes, and you become the kind of man the world has no choice but to reckon with. Drop in the comments, "My hunger obeys me." Say it. Mean it. 6. Disappear, then devastate. There is a moment in every serious man's journey where he must make a choice the majority of the world will never understand. The choice to disappear, not permanently, strategically. To go quiet on the timelines, to stop performing progress for an audience, to close the curtain on the work and let the silence around him grow loud while he grows powerful inside that silence. Most men cannot make this choice. They are too addicted to the feedback loop, too dependent on the dopamine of visibility, too psychologically fragile to exist without constant confirmation that someone is watching and approving. Machiavelli studied rulers who lasted and rulers who fell. One pattern appeared with devastating clarity. The prince who moved visibly was always easier to stop than the prince who moved invisibly. When your enemies can see your trajectory, they can calculate your destination. When they can calculate your destination, they can position themselves to block it. But when you operate beneath the surface, when your preparation is private and your ambition is known only to yourself, you remove from your opposition the most critical asset they need to neutralize you: information. You become a variable they cannot account for, and a variable that cannot be accounted for cannot be controlled. There is also a psychological dimension to this that most content will never tell you. The moment you begin publicly performing your progress, announcing your goals, narrating your transformation for an audience, you trigger something dangerous. The social recognition you receive begins to substitute for the actual achievement. Your brain, which cannot fully distinguish between the reward of accomplishment and the reward of acknowledgement, begins to feel satisfied before the work is complete. The result is a man who talks like a winner but moves like someone who has already collected the prize. You have seen this man. You may have been this man. The cure is radical and simple. Stop announcing. Start executing. When you resurface after a period of invisible work, sharper, stronger, more capable than anyone expected, the psychological impact on those who doubted you is total and irreversible. You do not have to say a word. Your results say everything. This is the discipline of building in the dark. It requires you to become your own audience, your own validation, your own source of confirmation that the work is worth doing. That is not isolation, that is sovereignty. Go dark on the noise, go deep on the mission. Let the world wonder what happened to you. Then show them exactly what happened to you. Drop in the comments, "I build in silence." The men who understand that statement are already operating at a different level. 7. How to become a man nobody can break. There is a category of man the world cannot easily explain. He has been broken before, sometimes completely, sometimes repeatedly. And yet he stands, not because life handled him gently or fortune smiled on him consistently, but because somewhere in the architecture of his character, he developed something no external circumstance can provide: an unbreakable relationship with his own will. This is not the man who never falls. This is the man who has fallen so many times that the ground no longer frightens him. That distinction is everything. Machiavelli wrote that fortune is like a river. When it floods, it destroys everything in its path. But the wise man builds embankments before the flood arrives. He does not wait for adversity to begin constructing his resistance. He builds his psychological infrastructure during the calm, so that when the storm arrives, and it always arrives, he is not scrambling for survival. He is executing from a position of prepared strength. This is not optimism. This is engineering. The unbreakable man does not hope hardship will not find him. He assumes it will. He prepares methodically. And when it arrives, it meets not a man who is surprised, but a man who has been waiting. Real psychological strength is not built in comfort. It is built in controlled exposure to difficulty. The men who become genuinely unbreakable are the ones who deliberately chose the harder path when the easier one was available, who voluntarily placed themselves under pressure, in discomfort, in situations where failure was possible. Every time you choose difficulty when ease was an option, you are making a deposit into a psychological account that pays compound interest in the form of unshakable confidence. Not the performative confidence of a man who has never been tested. The quiet, immovable confidence of a man who has been tested repeatedly and is still standing. People sense this when they are in his presence. There is a stillness about him that reads as danger to those accustomed to reactive, emotionally available, easily destabilized men. He does not rise to bait. He does not crumble under pressure. He is self-contained. At that level is one of the rarest and most commanding qualities a man can possess, because it signals to every person in the room that this man's power does not depend on their cooperation, their approval, or their participation. Adversity does not build character. It reveals it. Every scar you carry is not evidence of weakness. It is evidence of survival, proof that every version of reality that tried to stop you has failed. That proof is the foundation upon which the most dangerous kind of confidence is built. Drop in the comments, "The fire made me," because every man who has earned that statement knows exactly what it cost. 8. The people around you are making you smaller. That is a law operating in your life right now that most men are completely unconscious of. Its invisibility is precisely what makes it so devastating. It is not written in any contract. It is not announced by anyone around you. It operates silently, consistently, and without mercy in the background of every interaction you have, every environment you choose to place yourself inside. That law is this: you will never outgrow the collective standard of the people you surround yourself with. Not sustainably, not permanently. Machiavelli advised the prince with absolute directness on this. Choose your advisors with more care than you choose your battles, because bad counsel has destroyed more kingdoms than bad enemies ever could. He understood that the men around a leader do not merely influence his decisions. They shape the very framework through which he perceives what is possible, what is acceptable, and what is worth pursuing. A prince, surrounded by small thinkers, will eventually begin to think small, regardless of how large his original vision was. Here is the part no one in your life will tell you. The people closest to you, the ones who claim to love you and want the best for you, are often the most effective limiters on your growth. Not out of malice, out of something far more psychologically complex and far more difficult to defend against. When you begin to grow, when you begin to raise your standards and operate at a level that exceeds the shared ceiling of your circle, you trigger in the people around you a response that has nothing to do with you and everything to do with their own unconfronted limitations. Your progress becomes a mirror they did not ask to look into. Rather than face what that mirror shows them, many will consciously or unconsciously attempt to pull you back to the level where the reflection is comfortable again. They will call it concern. They will frame it as loyalty. They will dress it in the language of keeping you grounded, keeping you humble, keeping you realistic. What they are actually doing is protecting the shared ceiling from being broken. Because if you break it, they have no excuse left for why they have not. Recognize this, not with bitterness. Recognize it with clarity. When the people around you consistently minimize your ambitions and seem most comfortable when you are operating below your potential, that is not love. That is limitation wearing love's clothing. The general builds his inner circle the way he builds his army, with ruthless selectivity and zero tolerance for the kind of mediocrity that spreads through proximity. 5 relationships of genuine elevation are worth more than 50 relationships of comfortable stagnation. Audit your circle with the cold eye of a strategist. Your environment is not just where you live, it is what you are becoming. 9. Slow men beat fast men, every time. In a world engineered for instant gratification, where every platform and every algorithm is designed to deliver reward as fast as possible, the man who masters patience is not just disciplined. He is operating with a competitive advantage so profound, so rare, and so consistently underestimated that it becomes almost invisible. Speed is not the same as progress. Movement is not the same as direction, and the man who moves fast in the wrong direction does not arrive sooner. He simply fails with more momentum. Machiavelli studied power across decades, across regimes, across the rise and fall of men who appeared invincible and then collapsed without warning. The pattern he identified in those who lasted, who accumulated power that compounded rather than crumbled, was not brilliance alone. It was not aggression alone. It was the marriage of strategy with patience, the willingness to plant in seasons where no harvest was visible, to move with deliberate slowness when the world demanded urgency, to hold a position under pressure when every outside voice was screaming to react, to pivot, to abandon the plan. The prince who could not wait was always eventually outmaneuvered by the prince who could. Patience is so psychologically difficult for most men that the few who develop it gain an almost unfair structural advantage. Every time you choose the long-term position over the short-term relief, you are rewiring how your brain makes decisions. You are building a mind that operates on a longer timeline than the people competing against you. And a man operating on a longer timeline than his competition is a man who will almost always win, because he is playing a game his opponents do not even realize has started. Marcus Aurelius returned to one idea again and again in his private writings, that almost nothing urgent is actually important, and almost nothing important is actually urgent. Urgency is manufactured by the world around you to keep you reactive. Importance is determined by your own strategic clarity. The man who cannot distinguish between the two will spend his entire life responding to noise, while the signal, his actual mission, his actual potential, goes unaddressed. The long game demands a specific kind of faith, not religious, internal, the faith of a man who knows his own capacity deeply enough to trust the process even when results are not yet visible. even when the people around him have stopped believing, even when the timeline has stretched beyond what anyone else would tolerate. Plant your work like a man who will not be here for the harvest, and watch what grows when lesser men have long since walked away. 10. You were never the problem. Everything in this script has been building toward one singular, irreversible conclusion. The most dangerous force on this earth is not a system, not a circumstance, not an enemy with resources and reach. It is a man who has decided, fully, completely, without reservation and without the possibility of retreat. A man who has looked at every weakness inside himself, every limitation around him, every voice that told him to shrink, and chosen with the cold clarity of a general surveying his final battlefield to become something the world has no framework to stop. Machiavelli did not write his principles for the masses. He wrote them for the rare man, the man willing to see reality without the comfort of illusion, to operate without the crutch of approval, to build with the kind of focused, unwitnessed intensity that turns vision into legacy. That man is not born, he is forged. And the forging does not happen in the future. It does not happen when the conditions are right. It does not happen when you feel ready. It happens exactly where you are standing right now, in the decision, in the discipline, in the daily choice to become harder, sharper, and more intentional than you were yesterday. You are the weapon. The philosophy is the whetstone. Every day you apply these principles, you become an edge the world cannot dull. Most men who watch this video will nod. They will feel the truth of it in their chest for about 6 minutes. And then they will go back to the same habits, the same circle, the same negotiation with their own weakness. That is not you. You are still here. You are reading every word. You are listening to the silence underneath the noise. Machiavelli's final warning to the prince was not about enemies. It was about time. He wrote that men are so accustomed to delaying that they believe delay itself is a form of action. It is not. It is the most sophisticated form of surrender ever invented. Do not delay. Drop in the comments your final declaration. I am the general. I refuse to lose. Say it like you mean it, because the man who means it has already begun to become it. If this reached something real inside you, if it named something you already knew but had not yet said out loud, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. See you next video.